In North America, our cars tend to be just as large as our lust to build luxury apartment complexes. However, both Mazda and Toyota build hatchbacks that ignore the trends. So today I'm going to help you and myself decide which one is better. You may be wondering, what is considered a cheap hatchback these days? Well, if you ask Mazda and Toyota, they're going to tell you right about $24,000, $25,000. These are priced pretty similarly. The difference between the Mazda and Toyota is that, well, the Mazda just keeps going. Really, the Corolla tops out around the Carbon Edition Mazda 3 when it comes to features and cost, but really the 3 tries to be a full-blown luxury fighter if you decide to spend more money. Either way you go, you're going to have LED projector headlamps as standard. The Mazda does offer a steering adaptive function though. The Corolla gets a leg up with standard proximity unlock and lock, something that will come on every trim except for the base Mazda 3. But something the Toyota doesn't offer, period, is rain-sensing windshield wipers, which you'll find on every Mazda 3. Mazda fans should take notice. Lately, the brand has made the 3's base trims harder to find than your wallet in the multiverse of couches. The good news is that the Select gives you many more niceties for not a huge price bump. Briefly, if you enjoy fun, detailed car content without fluff, and you want to help me take the channel to new heights, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Overall, you're going to have a lot less variety with the Corolla than you will the Mazda because you can only get the SE or XSE trim here. Both are more sport oriented. This one obviously being the more basic one with 16-inch alloys. The XSE gets 18s. Similar story can be said for the Mazda, which gets 16-inch wheels on the base model, 18s on everything else. The nice thing with the Mazda is even if you cheap out, nobody can really tell. It still looks more upscale. Though I should mention with the Corolla, you can get some neat accessories like a black roof that is rounded out nicely if you equip it with the accessory spoiler, which is actually a lot larger than what you get with the GR Corolla. And I guess I should mention that if we're talking Corolla hatches, though it is truly a different car. In fact, seeing the GR next to the SE is like looking at before and after photos of a heartbreak-induced fitness transformation on Instagram. Briefly, I'd like to thank Royal South Mazda and Royal South Toyota for letting me test drive various Corollas and Mazda 3s to make this video possible. Royal South has an attentive, well-informed staff and has deep roots in the community of Bloomington, Indiana. If you're in the market, check them out and tell them thanks for me. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about looks. Personally, I'm very split between these two because they're so different. The Mazda 3 is very smooth, elegant, and premium, and the Corolla is just like with its different lines going everywhere. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are. Which one is better looking? But when it comes to which one is more practical and has a bigger cargo area, the Corolla handily loses. The Mazda 3 has got more cargo space on paper. In practice, it has a much deeper floor, and it also appears a touch wider, but the Toyota does offer a very flat surface with the second row of seats down. Both of these have numbers far behind that of the Civic hatchback, which is both longer and more efficient with its space. And both of them do have spare tires, though Toyota technically offers the enhanced cargo package, which is just a PR way of saying we're going to take away your spare tire to give you more space. In my mind, the biggest pro to the cabin of the Corolla hatchback is that it is straightforward. There's 8 buttons and 2 dials to control all of the HVAC. You have an 8-inch touchscreen standard on each model. The infotainment system has wireless Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, a very no-frills UI with a kind of frustrating user setup, but a good resolution and decent response time. Big analog gauges over here on the SE. The XSE works in a 7-inch driver display. Toyota does a good job with the basics here, and there's at least tweeters providing for an okay audio experience on the base model here as well. Where you're going to start to get disappointed is if you were looking for an upscale small car. Even if you step up to the XSE, where you'll find heated front seats with Softex upholstery, it just doesn't take a big enough step forward in terms of interior quality. There's still no padding of any sort for your knees. While there's some soft touch materials in here and contrast stitching, there's still a lot of cheap plastics. It does have a very clean look. It just avoids feeling expensive. I also want to talk about the features because Even if you do, again, step up to the XSE, you get a JBL sound system that doesn't have a subwoofer, so it's mid at best sound quality. You're also not going to have many of the features that are available with the Mazda 3 just because of where this stops at in the price point. Truthfully, the more Spartan approach is acceptable given it's an affordable hatchback. Just know that the Honda and Mazda step up the quality if that's a high priority for you. And a couple things that I'm really happy to see. One, you have soft, level rest points for your elbows, and you have soft seats that are pretty agreeable, and they get lumbar adjustment on the XSE. Even here at 6'3", I may not find myself overtly coddled, but support for my legs is good, and I really don't think I'd have any problem sitting in here for an extended period of time. Different story around back, where we run into several issues. One, you would need at least 3 years of yoga to gracefully get back there. Two, there's not very much legroom once you're there, though I should note I do have enough headroom. And once I'm back there and I have my knees situated, I would be okay. There's a standard center armrest, standard dual USB-C ports back there too. But this will be far from ideal if you have a large child seat or are constantly getting kids in and out of the thing. Now, if I also have the front seat set in a comfortable yet not excessive position in the Mazda 3, the back seat is still very much bottom of the class. In fact, in terms of usability, I would say the Corolla is maybe just a little bit better as it has more headroom and it's a little bit easier to fit my knees in there with the doors shut. One advantage that the Mazda 3 has over the Corolla is wider opening rear doors, making entry and exit a bit easier. Up front though is where this really pulls away from the Corolla. Even on the base or select grade Mazda 3s, you're going to have soft touch materials covering everything. While I am a little upset that this door card kind of protrudes out so much, at least it's plush where your knees rest. I'm sure this also helps with insulation for the sound system, which is much better than the Corolla. In fact, I would say the base 8-speaker system in here is an equivalent to the JBL setup in the Corolla. Plus, it manages to also be very simple, and it's even more analog, though in a way that's more polarizing, as your infotainment system here is controlled through a button and dial setup, which does have satisfying clicks to it, as do the HVAC controls, but it is oversimplified. Some things take a few extra steps, but trust me, after living with a Corolla with the new infotainment system, I think using it in motion is easier with the Mazda setup than it is with the Corolla. I just hope that Mazda refreshes the user interface here soon. All 3s will also get a larger 7-inch display built into the gauge cluster and Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it is wired only. When it comes to comfort, again, you have more soft touch materials in here. If you want lumbar adjustment, you will have to step up to the preferred. The seats themselves feel more firm. They're still well sculpted to my body, except for where my shoulders sit. They kind of pinch at them a little bit. Despite the grabby tendency, I find them to be supportive as well. For my particular body type, I think I prefer the Mazda's seat, whereas the Corolla should make a wider variety of people feel comfortable. Now, if we're looking at the Carbon Edition Mazda 3, which is priced about where the XSE Corolla is, you're going to have, again, nicer materials. You're going to have a much better sound system with the Bose setup, leather upholstery, heated front seats, a sunroof, and I think the whole aesthetic is more visually pleasing. Though another thing that really changes the experience between these two is the visibility. You have much smaller windows in the Mazda 3. The dashboard in here is even higher than it is in the Corolla. Now, if you start to step up past the Carbon Edition Mazda, you're gonna get things like a 360 view camera, a head-up display, a heated steering wheel, to help justify its then, low to mid 30s price point. Though if you're thinking this is an unfair comparison and that this is way too decked out to go against the Corolla, you really haven't seen a base model Mazda 3, because even then, the interior is still adorned in soft touch materials and it's basically looks the same. You just lose a lot of the features, you lose the leatherette or leather upholstery and the nice sound system. So really, nobody is left in the dust with the Mazda 3. Now, I have driven and completed a full review of the 2023 Mazda 3 hatchback if you'd like to check that out. For 2023, they added 5 horsepower after upgrading their cylinder deactivation technology, which also slightly improved the fuel economy numbers as well. Today, I'm driving a 2022, which on the road feels exactly the same, and that is a good thing. We have a proven 2.5 liter naturally aspirated inline 4 as standard. makes 191 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque for the new model year. While you are still going to need to rev out the engine to experience it to its full extent, it still has okay mid-range power, and I think overall, for this kind of car, you should be pretty happy with the base. But I like that Mazda also offers a turbocharged version of this, which makes way more power than it needs to, and 310 pound-feet of torque on regular octane. You can put premium in it to bump up those numbers. Expect a 0 to 60 around 6, maybe high 5s. It will be a few tenths slower on regular fuel, but no matter the octane, the turbo has very little lag and transforms the 3 into a relaxed little car, as it doesn't try to shuffle gears as much and gains speed with little effort. When I tested an all-wheel drive naturally aspirated version, I got to 60 in 8.4 seconds. The all-wheel drive system was very good at registering a slight amount of slip and making the adjustment that it needed to. Expect the front drive models to shave off a few tenths. Another thing that I really like about the Mazda that is kind of bittersweet is that they do offer a manual transmission. It's only on the base motor, and it only comes on the premium trim, and it only comes with front wheel drive, but it's there, and it's a pretty nice unit. It's light, it's precise, it's easy to use. Maybe the clutch could be a little firmer, but I really do like how smooth and engaging that transmission is. A vast majority of these will be equipped with a 6-speed automatic. It's okay. At the very least, it is a very smooth shifting transmission. Sometimes it scrambles for first gear, and that can be a little unrefined, and other times it feels like there's a gap in the gearing with the naturally aspirated engine, so you're kind of just waiting for the power to kick in. Nice little second gear pull there. Especially when you're starting to work yourself up to highway passing speed, I think you'll be a little happier that you chose the Mazda with the 2.5 than the Corolla with the 2-liter. It sounds a little bit more refined than the Toyota. And when you're at 65 miles per hour, you're gonna be revving just below 2,000 RPMs. While it does have some wind noise in here, it's not luxury car level quiet, I would still call it more serene than the norm. As I mentioned, this offers all-wheel drive, something that is unavailable with the Corolla unless you get the GR variant or the hybrid sedan. It seems to be pretty good at immediately getting power to the rear axle. It can send up to 50% there, and it does an okay job at side-to-side transfer as well at low speeds, helping you get unstuck. Another thing that makes the Mazda special is going to be how it handles. To start things off, the steering is very predictable. It's not like super quick or anything, but it responds in a natural way to each one of your inputs. You can place the car exactly where you want it to be. In other words, it's tight. The weight to it is also more substantial. It's more heavy without being a nuisance. Body roll is also well kept, so the car can really play around in the corners. You can adjust midway through, and it doesn't punish you for it. To top things off, you have communication from the road to the driver. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. Now, if you turn off a nice road, the Mazda 3 starts to lose some of its composure. It shouldn't beat you up, but it is more sporty. And then it also has a torsion beam rear suspension. That's the big news, the big criticism from a lot of people for this generation. But in order for you to unsettle the rear, you do have to be driving in a kind of obnoxious manner on rough, windy roads. The ride can get a little bit busy and choppy, maybe partially due to that rear suspension. The largest bumps here do pronounce themselves sharply into the cabin, but it's really not as punishing as most sport compact vehicles. If you're living around roads like this, the Mazda 3 definitely not an ideal vehicle, just more one that you'd probably be willing to put up with if you prioritize handling over maximum cushiness. As I mentioned, it's definitely a lot easier to see out of the Corolla than it is the Mazda 3. I think your outward view does make this feel more premium. There's like more car around you, and especially here with the red interior and the head-up display, it does feel a little bit more racy. While it is not a deal breaker for me, I have a feeling that cheap hatchback buyers would prefer larger windows. The first thing you notice jumping into the Corolla is it's a lot easier to see out of it, and it's a lot softer. Here on this very bad, abused road. The Corolla, even though this is the SE, which is supposed to have a sport-tuned suspension, it provides a much more isolated experience. It's also smooth. It still does translate some of the larger potholes and breaks in the pavement into the cabin, just in a slightly less ferocious manner. It's just an easier car to live with. And on top of that, you have a more objective driving position. You kind of sit up a little bit higher, so that pairs nicely with the lower windows here. It just comes at the expense of feeling sporty, but really this engine that's under the hood doesn't exactly sell you on sportiness either. It makes 169 horsepower, 151 pound-feet of torque, and it makes it way up in the rev range. That engine is paired up to a kind of neat, continuously variable transmission that uses a launch gear to help provide for linear low-speed performance, a common downfall of CVT transmissions. And then once it shifts out of this first gear, now we're continuously variable. And even then, it still does try to mimic gears. Outside of sport mode, response time is just adequate, and the car tends to have the typical CVT hum as it pulls up to speed under light to mid throttle. It does a good job of changing ratios for hills and an even better job of saving gas money. So we're talking 41 miles per gallon on the highway with the Hatch SE. You actually get worse gas mileage with the XSE due to the tires. For the hatchback Corolla, this is the only powertrain that is available. For 2023, you can no longer get a 6-speed manual, which I'm sure that didn't sell super well, and from what I've heard, it's a very light and kind of disconnected standard transmission, but I am still sad to see that go. A manual tends to add another dimension of personality, something the Corolla could use. Now let's do a quick acceleration test in the Corolla. Got about 8.4 seconds to 60. A automatic front drive Mazda 3 should get there around 8, maybe high 7s. So these aren't far off on paper, but the Mazda's numbers are hindered by slow shifts. In practice, it feels more peppy when you step on it than the Corolla. Once you get to highway speed, here about 65 miles per hour, it'll float the revs around the same mark, 2,000 RPM. Maybe a touch more noisy than the Mazda 3, but where there really isn't a comparison is on a back road. This is just not as fun. You definitely have more body motion and wiggle. It's kind of more disturbed by mid-corner tweaks, but that becomes less persistent. The steering itself tends to be pretty light. As you're picking up the speed, I'll put it in sport mode. Sharpens up a little bit of that response. Still very CVT-like. Yeah, it's just a lot less engaging. Still feels pretty capable, but the steering does feel more numb, a little bit more vague on center there, but still comes off as tight. It's light, but even though this isn't as engaging, on the bad roads, it still remains very composed, partially because it does have independent rear suspension as standard. It kind of just floats over everything and remains maybe a little more sure-footed, all helping this feel confident, capable, easy to drive, just without the emotion of the Mazda. With the Corolla, you're going to have improved safety equipment. Safety Sense 3.0 standard on every single one. That means a very good lane centering system, adaptive cruise, autonomous braking. Optional on the SE, standard with the XSE, is blind spot monitoring, something that will come standard on every trim except for the base Mazda 3. But the Mazda's active driving aids are much more rudimentary. You have lane departure prevention. You can get active lane centering, but that's only on the highest spec Mazda 3, and it really only works up to speeds of, I believe, 40 miles per hour. So that's just not something that Mazda really cared about. Fortunately, both of them do care about reliability. Without going too in depth, the Mazda has had some AC issues and turbo engine oil consumption problems that have since been fixed. Finicky autonomous braking, a few miscellaneous interior issues, and an airbag light also affected some. The Corolla's transmission initially bothered some with a rough shift out of its first gear, but other problems have been pretty minor and have tapered off as the generation carried on. Both are known to develop slight creaks and rattles though. The Corolla also has port and direct injection to help keep the intake valves clean. Overall, if reliability is a high priority to you, I wouldn't be afraid to buy either one of these, but the Corolla does have a better, more proven history when it comes to this generation, so this will win out in that category. Plus, when we consider running costs as a whole, better gas mileage here is also a big pro. So after driving both of these, what I've found is, despite them probably being the most impractical hatchbacks that you can buy in North America today, I think what we have here is two cars that hold very different things important. Either way you go, you have to make a compromise. On one hand is the Corolla, a car with aggressive looks and a capable, comfortable driving experience, but the flair is surface deep. The Mazda backs up its upscale swagger with a premium interior and an intriguing personality on road. It feels special despite the soulless base engine. However, with its focus on sporty luxury, the suspension forgiveness, driving aids, and visibility lag behind the Toyota. If you have the same basic practical needs, but prioritize having a ride that feels like more than just transportation, the choice is clear. For that reason, my personal pick is the Mazda 3. I think the Corolla is better for the more traditional buyer. It's a straightforward, sturdy, economical, easy to drive car with a little versatility and fun looks to help it stand out. But for that more sensible consumer, I'd probably advise getting the Corolla sedan for its much bigger backseat alone. Today, the hatch person, in my mind, wants something entertaining with a bigger trunk. And that's what the Mazda does well. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then leave a like to help me disrupt the YouTube algorithm. Subscribe and hit the bell for more and to help me get to the next level. Thank you to my loyal patrons. I'll catch you in the next one. One advantage I will give to the Mazda is that it definitely has an easier egress and degress. Is that a mark on the damn... Oh, okay. That's... Wait.